We're here to talk about run form. So last week it went terribly awful for the first 11 minutes of it because I was trying to be outside like Claudia is, where it's all nice and pretty and a cool backdrop and all this other crazy stuff. And so I had to stop and come back into the house and ended up still having the rest of the chat with some people. So I'm going to recap a little bit of what I talked about last week, and then I'll get into kind of what I'm going to cover this week. So last week I talked about running and essentially how it is it's just the body's way to prevent yourself from falling over and over and over and over, if that makes sense. Hang on one second. I got some feedback. Let me mute everybody. There we go. So basically running, all it is preventing yourself from falling on your face over and over and over by manipulating the body's position in space. So it's very simple. Running is very simple. Running is something that's actually natural, right? Your physiological system doesn't think it's natural, but it is a natural biomechanical movement. Riding a bike is not natural. Swimming is not natural. Lifting weights is not natural. All these movement patterns are not necessarily natural, but running is actually in our DNA. It's natural. And it used to be utilized for, survival, whether it's to get food or, to not be eaten or killed. So the purest form of it, last week I discussed a little bit about running form, how it should look, and kind of what it means. I want to reinforce one thing that I said last week that I think I kind of got cut out a little bit on was, much like real estate, it's about location, location, location. I'm not talking about the places you go to run. I'm talking about the way your foot lands in proportion to your body. Okay, and I did this archaic drawing last week that I should have taken a picture of. It looked like a lunar lander more so than a person running. But I'll show you what I mean. So when we're running, you hear a lot of people talking about forefoot, midfoot, all that kind of stuff. What I want you to think about is not so much, and I don't want you to be able to see my feet in this shot. I want you to not so much think about where my foot is landing in terms of heel or toe or midfoot. And I want you to think about the position of my foot when I'm landing in space. Okay? What I mean by that is, if you lift your leg up like this, your toe should naturally drop down, and this leg should just be kind of loose and floppy, right? This is a natural position, completely relaxed. This should be exactly how you land when you run. That foot is out front of you, obviously. What I see so many athletes doing is reaching, and that's where that big heel strike comes in, is they reach out and they try to overstride. Look at my torso position. It is behind my knee, and it is actually kind of behind my hips. This is exaggerated, obviously. So let's bring it back in just a bit. Now I'm above my hips, but I'm still behind my knee. Okay, and I want you to think about that. In order to make that happen, the foot has to land directly under the knee, which lands directly under the hips. To get to that position, I'm not leaning like this. I'm leaning like this, okay? And you can see if you do that, you'll feel yourself kind of tipping forward. So when I say location, I mean the foot needs to be under the knee. And a good check for that is, and you go, well, how the hell do I know if it's under my knee? A good check for that is if you can look down when you're running and you see all of your shoelaces, you're wrong. Your foot needs to come back into the body, or your body needs to go out more to meet the foot, right? So you can either shorten your stride, which increases your cadence, or you can get a little bit more of a forward lean so that you're actually going faster. The problem you'll have with that is you cannot keep up with that muscularly or vascularly initially. You will not be able to run in a more forward lean pattern for a long period of time because it's going to require much more energy. You haven't developed that quite yet. So bring that foot back, increase your stride rate, right? Your amount of turnover. I would say the majority of you, if you are in an average range, and I covered this last week, but I'm going to cover it again. If you're in an average height of say 5'5" to 5'8", male or female, I don't care. If you're in that framework, your cadence should be around 178 to 182, okay? Steps per minute. So let's say 180 just for easy math in just a second. If you're under 5'5", 5'6", it should be still up there quite a bit. It doesn't need to go over 180. But here's the caveat. If you're over, say 5'7", 5'8", these aren't exact numbers, it's just a range. If you're taller, if you're up near that 6 foot range, your cadence is naturally going to be lower because you have longer levers for legs, right? You're going to have a longer leg, which is going to take more energy and you're going to cover more space when you run. And unless you're an Olympic level runner, you don't have the muscular ability to turn that leg over quick enough to get to 180. But you should try to attain that. That should be your goal. Okay. So you want to shorten those strides. You want to bring the foot back under your box. You want your feet, when they land on a foot strike, to be under the hips. Your knee should be right here. When I stand like this, I can look down and maybe see that last little piece of my shoelace. I should never be able to read the label on the tongue of my shoe. If you can, you're looking for some type of posterior chain issue, which is going to be like hamstring or glutes or Achilles problems. And you're really just asking for a lot of problems. That just means you're reaching out. Again, I don't care if your heel hits first. A lot of times, long endurance athletes, that's their development, is they start landing on their heel more and more because they're running slower and slower, okay? So what you want to think about is, don't care about how it lands. You want to pay attention to where it lands, location, location, location. Any questions on that? If you have a question, you can unmute and chime in at any point in time. I can't see everybody in the room, so you can't raise your hand because that will do us no good. So shoes absolutely matter, but they do not matter in the way that you think. And this is probably going to get some kickback if any running shoe store owners see this. But I'll tell you now, there's something that's happened since the 60s and 70s until now with shoes. And what has happened is, if you think about it, and let's think back to, I mean, you can look at I guess it's the Indians down in Mexico, or you can look even further back. Before we had these things, before we had shoes, we ran barefooted, right? So our bodies are built. And last week we did a drill where people took their shoes and socks off, and you step down. And when you step down, watch how your foot spreads to support the weight of your body. And then when you lift it up, it comes back. That's what it's supposed to do. Those bones in there and tendons and ligaments are supposed to be able to kind of flex a bit. The bones obviously aren't going to flex, but I'm no scienceologist. But they're supposed to be able to flex, right? A little bit of a buffer there. What happens is as we wear these shoes, our foot starts to narrow. You see how this point comes together? How many people does your pinky toe kind of almost want to like hide up and under that second to last toe? Right? So the pig that went wee all the way home tries to hide behind his friend a little bit because the toe box in your shoe has been too small for all your life. Kids wear shoes all the time. Adults wear shoes all the time. I encourage you to stop wearing shoes as much. If you can walk outside in the grass, walk outside in the grass with no shoes on. You got to strengthen those muscles and tendons in those feet. Another thing that happened with the invention of shoes for performance is we've increased the drop, right? So we've increased the stack from here to here. And what that means is you'll hear that, a common shoe nowadays, if you go out and buy a shoe like this one, for example, is an 8 millimeter drop, meaning it's 8 millimeters higher here than it is here. Okay, that's why if you take and you say, oh man, look at those new shoes, I guarantee 4 of you on here have a shoe addiction. You buy a shoe because it's cute, or you buy a shoe because you like the color and it matches your freaking new running pants, right? I'm not even going to discuss that problem. But if you take a shoe like this that is 0 drop, it is even here and it is even right here under the arch of the foot, okay? You take a shoe that's 0 drop and you go from an 8 millimeter drop to a 0 drop, you are almost immediately going to experience some type of overuse issue with your posterior chain. Hamstring, glutes, Achilles, plantar fascia, something like that. Reason being, when you wear this, it is reducing the amount of work that your calf has to do for this heel to hit the ground, okay? So if your calf is this long, for example, obviously I'm not a medicalologist. We got a couple of those on here that can chime in. But your calf is this long, it's a little bigger. But when you put a shoe on that makes it not buffer as far, you're teaching it, hey, I don't need you to go that far. You only need to go like this far. And then you put on a shoe that requires, because it's 8 millimeters less, it requires 8 millimeters more flex. You do that to your car. You put on a set of shocks that's too short and watch what happens. You're going to mess everything up. That's exactly what this is. It'll overwork that calf and posterior chain. So my lesson for you right now is stop buying shoes because they're cute. Buy shoes because they work. My biggest pet peeve with athletes is Nike, for example, comes out with a shoe and oh my God, it's beautiful. It makes me so fast. It's got this like carbon crap in it. Oh my God, look at these things. Yeah, I know they're $800, but what's 2 pair, right? So they go out and buy these shoes, but they've been running in Brooks for 10 years. or they've been running in Hoka's or Asics or something else. Not all shoes are created equal. Just because it says size 9.5 doesn't mean it's a 9.5, okay? Think about this drop. If you want to get to a more natural running shoe, I would take this shoe, which is my long distance training shoe. I would take this shoe and I'd say, okay, we're at 8mm drop on this one. The next pair that I buy, I want it to be in the same brand because they're generally the same design, uppers and lowers and things like that. But you want to take this shoe and you want to say, okay, I want to go to a 4 or a 6mm drop, and you rotate it in. 1 run with the new shoe, 2 runs with the old shoe, so on and so forth, working it in, okay? I know several of you on here that are nodding your heads yes have never done that. You buy a new pair of shoes, you go running them because why do I have shoes if I can't freaking run in them, right? Thought so. So think about that. You want to work these shoes into play. Now, the last thing I'll say about shoes is I don't care what the marketing tells you. Do your research. Know your drop. Know what you need in the toe box. Know the width that you need. Know the uppers. You can go from a Brooks Ghost 5, for example, that you've ran in for years. You've run the Brooks Ghost series forever. Love the shoe. You can make a 6 and you put it on and it just doesn't fit right. Listen, they don't make these because they like you. They make these because you'll buy them, okay? So they go through and they will change stuff. They'll change the upper. All of a sudden it gets smaller. It gets more narrow in the toe box. They change the density of the foam. They put this little crappy plastic thing in here. They put an air pocket in here. All kinds of crap they can do to make your shoes better, but in the end, it has to work for you. So be very cautious of that. If you go to a running store to buy your shoes, which I hope you support local running stores, if you buy pair of shoes that you don't like or don't work, they'll switch them out. The majority of stores will switch them out. So be mindful of that. Buy a shoe because it works, because you're not going to look very good if you're having to walk everywhere because you've got plantar fasciitis, right? So you can sit in your house all you want with your eStim machine, or you can use them to walk into your doctor's office because you got to go get PRP injections or whatever that stuff's called. You can use them to walk into your doctor's office, but you look like a clown because you're not using running shoes the way they should be ran in. Some of you are feeling really guilty right now. I feel like I'm yelling at you, and I'm not. I love you equally, but you know who you are. So the last thing I'll say about shoes, I know that was the last thing, but this is the real last thing. Think about this shoe right here. This foam is a sponge, okay? Just because a pair of shoes should last you 300 miles, for example, if you run in off-road stuff or gravel, or you run in dust, dirt, or rain, it's going to reduce the life of this shoe. This foam will absorb some of the outside conditions that we make it run in. So all of a sudden, when you start getting a little bit of a niggle or your leg starts bothering, you've got a decent running base, but you're kind of not feeling right, think about your shoes first and foremost, okay? That's if you're running the way you're supposed to be running and not running hard all the time. Think about your shoes first and foremost because they collect that stuff, and this then becomes like a piece of concrete. It's no longer this like spongy shock absorber. It gets harder and harder, okay? So think about that. Don't be a dummy. Get the right shoes for you. Train right. Now, who's ready for a run form lesson? Me too. Okay, so today I want to talk about the knees. Last week, and I kind of made this series idea up literally while Randy was sitting on the call with me a while ago, but last week we covered the ankles, right? So the ankles and you can add in there the foot. The ankles and the foot are our base of support, right? They are the tires on your car. They are that important. Maybe even more important because we always carry a spare tire, but I don't have a spare foot. Anyway, so ankle mobility, very important. Foot mobility, very, very important, okay? When you take your shoes off, be nice to your feet. Sometimes it's good to kind of take the outsides of your feet and wiggle them a bit. Help those joints kind of loosen up and move around, especially if you wear shoes a lot. Very, very important to have that dexterity in your feet. Today, if I can get it up high enough, there we go. We're going to focus on the knees. The knees are the shock absorber of your vehicle. Okay, your vehicle is your body. They're what takes the beating and the banging. They're what tells you when you might be 10 pounds heavier than you probably should be because quarantine life. They're what tells you that you have some type of shoe issue and you may need a new shoe because the shoe's not absorbing the shock anymore. Okay, so let's talk about the knees a bit. Now, when I say knees, the first thing you probably think about is like IT band syndrome. Right, that's typically people's favorite thing to talk about. Let's see if I can turn this camera here. Hang on, I'm probably gonna screw it up or whatever. There you go. I'm taller now. Good. All right. So think about the knees. Right, the knees are what kind of absorb all the shock over the course of life. You got to be nice to them. Now, there's a couple of things with the knees. The knees are reactors to the other forces around them. Can you all still hear me okay? Make sure that microphone's not too low. Okay. The knees are reactionary to everything else. So if you think about just the knee joint itself and how it works, it is stabilized by the muscles that are around it. Okay? Now, we talked last week about protagonists and antagonists. You have two muscles. You have a quad and a hamstring. Okay? Let's do hamstring because most people's hamstrings are about this big. So you have your quad, this big beefy muscle. It's the one that's really sexy that everybody likes to look at, right? You've got this big quad. And you're a runner. You've been running all your life. And your hamstring is like this. It's like this little freaking rubber band that's just begging to snap when it gets cold. When this muscle pulls, so this quad is working, this muscle has to give. When this muscle pulls, that muscle has to give, okay? And in a very pure sense of the form, the knee is trapped in this tug of war between muscles, right? So think about it this way. When you lift your leg up like this, what does your leg do, right? So you lift it up. Does your knee kind of collapse in a bit? Or does it hold firm? When you do a squat, so you do a one-legged squat, what does your knee do? Does it collapse in like that? If it does, that is because there's other stabilizing muscles that are not allowing it to stay out and stay firm, okay? So the knees are actually reactionary devices, essentially, to the strength and balances that you have or do not have in your body, okay? So what I want you to think about is, with your knees, it's very, very important to isolate them. They can, if you're doing like double leg squat, which is good, you can mask Let's see here. Let's turn off Bluetooth. Maybe that's connected to headphones. How about now? Is that better?
Yeah.
Apparently, some Bluetooth device in my house just paired to my iPad oddly. All right. Now we're good now, right? Okay. So you guys got me all sweating. So if you think about the knees, and you take someone that can squat 300 pounds 50 times, and you take them and give them an isolated movement of a one-legged squat, that knee, I almost guarantee you, is going to collapse in because it cannot hide its imbalance, which is going to be up here in the glute complex. It cannot hide that imbalance behind the other one, right? So you want to do a lot of single leg stuff. You want to isolate it. Now, so very simple. At your house, you can do this literally. If you're playing Mind Right Bingo while you're making your new recipe tonight, you can actually stand there at your stove and do one-legged squats, all right? I'm not talking this CrossFit squat that goes down and like leg kicks up and all that craziness, okay? I'm talking literally just a little bit. Go down until that knee breaks in and then come back up. So right there, come up, okay? You can do that while you're texting your friends. You can do that as a warm-up before your run, before your bike, things like that. So really isolate that and really work it and see how many you can do before the leg goes, I'm kind of done. Then do the other side. Very, very important though. You want to stabilize those hips, which the hips are next week's lesson, so I won't talk much about them. But the muscles in the glute complex and the front of the hips are what help that knee track properly, okay? Now, so you'll notice if you have ran behind somebody before, I guarantee you have seen something like this. When their toe comes off, their toe either kicks in, more than likely kicks out, or their foot comes in like this, right? So when you're running, have you ever clipped your calf with your other foot before? And you'll know if you have. Just about everybody's kind of clipped it before. What happens is when you lift that knee like this and you remove pressure from the ground, this hip wants to collapse. It's tired. It doesn't want to work. The natural movement is to kind of close that gap down, okay? So very, very important is you want to think about keeping it out like this, right? So that's where these movements come in to really strengthen the ones that guys don't like to do. I'm not telling you to lay on the ground and do it, but these are very important to strengthen that glute. Remember, the knee is reactionary. Now, here's why that stuff is important. If your foot lands like this and your knee is allowed to come in because of the hip weakness, this knee's shock absorption is going to be outside. All the tension goes on the outside of that leg right there, which means instead of it being absorbed by the knee, the actual joint of the knee passing the stress off to the quad or the calf, it's going to send that up this lateral side of the body. Come back up into the hip. It's going to be on the outside of the knee. Could be on your peroneals, which are these cool little muscles down here that you see on people that are really fit, right? So it's going to be all out there. It's going to cause this knee to overwork on this side because of the stress. So one thing that you can do to make sure that you're working on that actively, the drill I'm going to give you before we shut this down is when you're running, it's a proprioceptive cue, okay? Two things you're going to look for. One, can I see my shoelaces, right? That was our lesson from last week. And two is when you're running, I want you to find like a line. It could be a dash, it could be a dotted line, something with some width about that wide, about like a street line. Now don't run in the middle of the freaking road, okay? Let's not be dummies. But find something like that, and when you land, you want to make sure that the gap in your feet is about like that, right? So you can see my feet, you can see a gap in between where my feet are at on the ground. Now, if I take this next step, so I'm here and I'm not paying attention, more than likely I'm going to land almost in front of it. We see that? That's the model walk. Look at where this tension is in relation to the point of my hip. The tension is going to be on the outside of that leg. So you want to think about just moving it over just a bit. Just like the stabilizers, the shocks in your car. If you know anything about mechanics, if you have your shocks in your car and they're say 2 degrees off, it's going to end up overstressing that shock, and you're going to have some type of issue with your suspension at some point in your car's life, okay? So I want you to think about that. We want to make sure that this is stacked properly to allow the body's systems to do what it should do instead of overworking it like this. Does that make sense? Clear as mud, I can tell. All right, so that's your tip. It is simply just occasionally, I want you to glance down and notice what your feet are doing, where they're landing, how they're landing. Can you see your shoelace? And do you have daylight between your feet? A great thing to do when you're running, if you run at night or in the morning when the street lights are on, when you run and you're directly under the street light, look down. Can you see light coming through there on foot strike? Now, let's be smart about this because I'm a lightologist. If you're running away from the light, you're going to have a skewed shadow. So it's pretty much just under that light. But I want you to think about that on your runs. That's your cues to check in on, okay?